Well, good evening, everybody. Here I am again, Red Blanchard, and tonight I'd like to talk to you about what it was like to be a musician in the days of the big band era. That's what I was. I played trombone in a band. We went all over New England, playing for community dance halls like auditoriums. We also played at many college fraternity houses where all the rich boys would hire an orchestra to play in their fraternity house. Some of the times were at the Ivy League schools like Dartmouth up there in Hanover, New Hampshire. We'd go up there and play for the Dartmouth Winter Carnival. And of course, we had to drive 100 miles in the snowstorms and everything. It didn't matter. Whatever the weather was, we had to show up. Funny thing, too, back in those days, the union scale for musicians, at least in my small area of New England, wasn't like the big ones in New York, but it was a union job nonetheless. And our scale was $1 an hour before midnight and $1.50 after midnight. And on top of that, whoever drove a car, which I was one of them, you would get more money for driving the car than you got for playing. I got $6 a car for taking 4 or 5 of the boys in my car to drive to the job. So we'd pick them all up there. We all lived at Gardner. Everybody in the band lived in Gardner. And I'd pick every 4 or 5 people up and drive anywhere in New England, even sometimes further out. We even went down to Richmond, Virginia one time. That was quite a job to go that far. Well, anyway, I'm thinking of this Dartmouth Winter Carnival because that's one of those schools where all the rich boys go, and they hired us to play in their fraternity house, and they had a small dance area, which they kept really dark. You could hardly see what you were doing. Of course, our music stands had lights on them. By the way, at that time when I played trombone, I went by the name of Red Bone and his trombone. And for years, people called me Red Bone until I got out of the music business, years later. So anyway, we traveled all over New England. I made a couple of notes here to make sure I don't forget. One of the places was a big amusement park in Fitchburg, Mass. Called Whalum Park. Whalum Park had a big dance hall, and they had a different band every week. They had the big bands like Tommy Dorsey and Glenn Miller, and then sometimes they had us. There was just a dance there every week at Whalum Park, and I don't know if Fitchburg still has Whalum Park to this day or not, but that was back in the 1930s. Then we went over to Springfield, Mass. That's western Massachusetts. Springfield had a big one called the Butterfly Ballroom, and all the big bands played there, and so did we. And the Butterfly Ballroom, that was about 50 or 60 miles, I believe, maybe 75 from Gardner. I would drive my car there for $6 a car as usual. That was to cover the car and the gas and the whole thing. Another place we like to go is down in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, but I've been racking my brains. I can't remember the name of the place in Woonsocket, Rhode Island, but they had a band there named Bob Richmond, was the local band that played there all the time, and sometimes they would travel around and we'd play in the same place where this Bob Richmond played, which I can't think of the name. But I do remember Bob Richmond had a girl singer, and she sang a really nice song, which I like very much, and I've been racking my brains trying to remember that too, but I can't. Maybe it'll come to me a little bit later on. Down in Richmond, Virginia, was a place called the Tantilla Gardens, and we'd drive down there. That's 200 or 300 miles from Gardner, so it was an all-day drive, and we'd stay overnight in a hotel. As a matter of fact, now that I think of it, when we went up to Dartmouth and Hanover, New Hampshire, there was no place to stay in Hanover. We had to go a few miles away across the state line to White River Junction, Vermont. We stayed in a hotel in White River Junction. It was right next to a railroad, and I remember all night long we'd hear the men yelling, bumping these cars back and forth, clank, 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 and yelling to each other, and the trains would make a lot of noise and maybe blow a whistle. But, we had to sleep there, and so we could play the job over Dartmouth. Dartmouth is one of the Ivy League top schools. Now, we never played at Harvard or Yale or any of the other Ivy League, only Dartmouth. But I'm sure that all the other Ivy League schools, Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Penn, can't think of too many of them, but we only played at Dartmouth. Well, that's how it was in the big band era. And along came World War II. And I decided I'm never going to hit the big bands like Glenn Miller and Benny Goodman and those people. So I decided I was going to drop out of the music business and go into electronics. And that's what I did. I quit the band. I took a job over in Schenectady at the General Electric, worked there during the war, and after the war I went into radio broadcasting and so on. But that's a long story. Has very little to do with Gardner, Mass. I'm hoping to post this on the Gardner website in the hope that a lot of people in Gardner might remember the band we played in. It was called Eddie Hamilton's Band. His real name was Eddie Hamill, but the name was Eddie Hamilton. And we had 3 brass, about 3 saxes, and 4 rhythm. And the bass player would sing, and sometime the piano player would sing. And I played trombone. We had 2 trumpets. Eddie Hamill's brother played one of the saxophones, and the drummer and the banjo player, or I should say guitar, those are 2 brothers. What was his name? Pelletier. Eddie Pelletier and his brother, which I can't remember his name either. So there we have a story of the big band era as lived by somebody that was sort of on the fringes of it. I miss it though. I like it a lot. I still have a trombone here and I play it every once in a while, but my lip is really not up to snuff now. Maybe I should practice more. Anyway, until the next time I think of something to say. Oh, one thing. During this talk that I've been giving you, I've been experimenting with different backgrounds, popping in from time to time a different background, different big buildings, famous cities, that one Grenoble over in Russia. And you might have noticed the background changing as I talk. It's like I'm jumping from city to city, but actually I'm sitting right here in front of a green screen like they do on television. And I guess this is television. So until the next time, I'm Red Blanchard, and I say so long until then.